Last weekend, governors of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC in Nigeria, were locked in a closed-door meeting with the National Assembly caucus of the party. The only item on the table was the governor's opposition to recent guidelines by the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, which in general terms forbid them from tampering with funds meant for local government administration. Their counterparts on the other side of the political divide also appear to harbor the same feeling of disapproval for the NFIU guidelines. What are the governors afraid of? What will be the intrinsic benefits of having the local governments manage their own funds? And beyond issuing guidelines to govern this new regime, how can genuine accountability and transparency be fostered for the well-being of the greatest number of Nigerians whose lives are continually being impacted by policy decisions at the grassroots? For more on this, we'll be joined in a short while by Hamzat Lawal, co-founder of Connected Development, CODE, the principal promoters of the Follow the Money campaign. We'll also be talking to Akintunde Disu, an environmental activist who has been using his involvement in art to wage a war against plastic pollution in Lagos and its environs. He will be looking at the menace of plastic in worsening the current flooding in Lagos.
And from there, we'll be rubbing minds or moving on to rub minds with Tope Fashola, a former presidential candidate. He's going to be here looking at Nigeria's economy and multiple tax burden on businesses. Now, as we bring it home today, we'll be speaking with Seyi Adeyemo, a public affairs analyst who's going to be discussing Nigeria's relations with South Africa in the midst of current tensions that are being generated by xenophobic issues in the southern African country. We'll also be catching up on news-making headlines across the globe and review the newspapers with Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Oji Okpi, of course, will also be here to fill us in on what's trending around the world. So it's going to be all of that and a whole lot more today on The Morning Show. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe today. Now, the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari is going to depart Abuja today for Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to attend the third edition of the Future Investment Initiative organized by Saudi's Public Investment Fund. The theme this year is What's Next for Global Business? And the event, according to a statement by presidential spokesman Malam Garba Shehu, is going to hold on October 29th until the 31st, with focus on three key pillars. Now, these three key pillars are sustainable futures, technology for good, and also advanced society. President Muhammadu Buhari does hope to use the occasion to speak about available economic opportunities in Nigeria, the effectiveness of his administration's policies to improve business in Nigeria, and, of course, invite investors into the country. Doctor.
Well, you see that of late, President Buhari has been doing a lot on the foreign policy front.
Yeah.
Either, going to South Africa, or going to Yokohama, or heading off now to
Russia.
Russia to attend the Russia-Africa summit, and now almost within a few hours of his return, if I may say so, he's off to Saudi Arabia again to attend a meeting. Now, I think that that is to be encouraged. The president of the country is the chief, foreign policy, person for the country. And to the extent that this is about attracting businesses and investment to Nigeria, I think that, the forum provides us a good opportunity. And we've been told what the agenda for this meeting is. One, to attract investment. Two, to see how the proposed partnership between Aramco and the NNPC, can be strengthened or, operationalized, because Aramco is said to have an interest in helping Nigeria with the refineries.
Yeah.
There's also, the plan to attract investment in the oil and gas sector, particularly with regard to the Ajaokuta Kaduna Kano gas pipeline, what is called the AKK project. So to that extent, I think it is good. But what I always say about these, international forays is the need for follow-through or for follow-up. We don't seem to have developed enough capacity to make sure that even when we enter into these agreements, will follow through immediately to translate the agreements into concrete, measurable outcomes for the benefit of Nigeria and its people. Now, again, if you look at it, the president, he had said previously that he will no longer allow government officials to just travel as a wish or to go with large contingents. And consistently, in his trip to Russia, even to Russia, and even this trip, he has kept his delegation quite lean. Yeah. He's going with 3 governors, and 4 ministers, we're told, plus the National Security Advisor. However, in terms of the objective for this meeting, you'll be wondering why he has chosen the governors that he has chosen. I think he has the governor of Borno, the governor of Kebbi, and the governor of Katsina. The question when I saw that list is, what is the relevance of these governors to the, focus at that meeting? You will think that, the governors that are accompanying him will be tied to the objective of the meeting. However, in terms of the ministers, the Minister of Trade and Investment, the National Security Advisor, you can understand, why they have been chosen. But, with regard to the size of delegation, the president himself is, setting a good example. The third leg of this trip is that when he finishes in Saudi Arabia, he will use the opportunity to go to Mecca to go and observe the Umrah. Yeah. I hope that the persons who are not involved in the Umrah, they will return home immediately and will not stay behind.
Absolutely. And I like what you said, Doctor, about the need to follow up with these things, because even last week when we were in Russia and we were discussing past agreements with Russia that had kind of been abandoned and then brought up again back at this trip, and you look at the time frame of that of 3 years, and it's like, wow, a lot could have been achieved with Nigeria and Russia if one had followed through within that time frame. So yes. On to our next story. Access Bank is set to acquire the Transnational Bank Limited of Kenya. Now, this deal, which comes exactly 7 months after Access Bank successfully consummated a business combination deal with the defunct Diamond Bank, would see the bank expand its footprint across Africa. Now, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Access Bank PLC, Mr. Herbert Wigwe, confirmed the developments in a telephone chat with our sister outfit This Day on Sunday. He anticipated that the deal is going to be finalized before the end of next week. Access Bank is now going to join GT Bank and the United Bank for Africa PLC, also known as UBA, two other Nigerian banks with the presence in the Kenyan market. No surprises here. I knew that this was something that Access Bank would consider after such a huge merger last year. Now they join GT and UBA, and they're spreading their wings across Africa. How do you take this, Doctor?
Yes, you're right. I mean, GT Bank and UBA, United Bank for Africa PLC, they're already on the ground in Kenya. And now, Access Bank is going there. Access Bank, in terms of performance, in terms of the books, looks like the strongest bank in the market. Yeah. And they've been able to achieve remarkable success since the merger, or is it the acquisition of Diamond Bank, recording between 2018 and 2019 about 44% growth, of profit after tax. Huge. And, going to Kenya, and other parts of Africa shows great confidence. And the transnational bank in Kenya, they are virtually taking it over complete, about 97.3% stake in that bank. Huge. And we have many Nigerian banks, in Gambia, in Ghana, in Rwanda, so you find these Nigerian companies, either banks or insurance operators, showing great confidence and reaching out. But, for us as Nigerians, we will still ask the selfish question about the objective, of the central bank to deepen financial intermediation in Nigeria. While, it is good for these banks to continue to grow, to become continental and global players, I think their primary objective of helping to drive growth within the Nigerian economy is something that we as Nigerians, even if selfishly, should continue to ask for. So good for Access Bank, and congratulations to Herbert Wigwe and his team.
And not just we as Nigerians, but the banks themselves need to know that Nigeria must still be their primary objective. Now, the abducted Nigerian students and staff at Engravers College in Kaduna that we spoke about recently have been released now by their abductors. Spokesman to the Kaduna state government, Samuel Arwan, disclosed this in a statement that said that they were released on Saturday. Now, he said that the victims, most of whom are minors, and their families are now going to be focusing on recovering from this really undeserved trauma. The spokesman urged all communities not to give comfort to criminals by dividing victims and inserting ethno-religious narratives for the activities of ruthless miscreants. Residents have also been told to be more vigilant and also cooperative with the security agencies in order to secure the state. So the good news, if we can see any good news in this terrifying situation, is that the minors and their school teachers or their matron and teacher have now been returned to their families, thankfully. Doctor, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, it's good news and it's worthy of celebration. But again, we are reminded of the crisis of insecurity in Nigeria and the, ordeal that is faced by innocent school children, whether it's in, Dapchi or Zibok or Chibok or Dapchi, or now, as we have seen in, Kaduna State, at the Engravers College. Yeah. But, of course, the parents will be happy that they've been reunited with their children, 6 students, all minors, and 2 teachers. We've not been given any information whether ransom was paid or not. But the fact that they have been rescued is enough. I think that the authorities, the police in particular, the Operation Puff Adder, where the officials, the officials of Operation Puff Adder were the ones who rescued these, young children. We hope that they will follow up by ensuring that the kidnappers, the bandits, are apprehended and they are made to face the full wrath of the law.
Absolutely.
The second thing, of course, is the point you made about trauma. I think it is also important that, the students and their teachers are debriefed and they are offered help in terms of counseling, in terms of, trauma treatment, because, we respond to situations differently. For anyone to be denied his or her, right to liberty, freedom of movement, is a lot. And, some people could, have psychological issues as a result of that. I think counseling will be required. Trauma, treatment will be required. And I think that, the point that was made again is that we should respect the privacy of the students, but whatever it is, we're glad that they are back.
Absolutely. And it raises the topic even just beyond insecurity, back to the topic of insecurity in schools. That is just the one thing that nobody is going to tolerate at all. The question now is as well, how is the government going to ensure that when these students do return to school, they are safe and protected at school as well? It's time for the government to put the right measures into place. But what are the right measures is the million-dollar question that no one seems to have the answer to. Because you hear of an attack, you respond to the attack, and then the next thing you know, you hear of another attack.
Well, one of the measures we had recommended earlier is perimeter fencing.
Yes.
Maybe additional measures can also be taken depending on the peculiarity of each location and situation. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll take a break, right?
Yes, let's go on a very quick commercial break. And of course, as soon as we are back, the headlines continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still on the news headlines and we're heading over to Washington, where President Donald Trump has confirmed that the Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in a U.S. military operation. Now, the president has said that the U.S. had brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice, saying, quote unquote, "He died like a dog, like a coward." The president said U.S. Special Forces had conducted a daring raid, which lasted around 2 hours, during which a large number of al-Baghdadi's companions were also killed or captured. U.S. officials scoped out al-Baghdadi's whereabouts a couple of weeks before the raid. And according to the president, al-Baghdadi himself actually killed himself and 3 of his children during the operation by setting off a suicide vest. Let's take a closer look.
Baghdadi has been on the run for many years, long before I took office. But at my direction, as Commander-in-Chief of the United States, we obliterated his caliphate 100%, in March of this year. Today's events are another reminder that we will continue to pursue the remaining ISIS terrorists to their brutal end. That also goes for other terrorist organizations. They are likewise in our sights. Baghdadi and the losers who worked for him, and losers they are. They had no idea what they were getting into. In some cases, they were very frightened puppies. In other cases, they were hardcore killers. He was a sick and depraved man, and now he's gone. Baghdadi was vicious and violent, and he died in a vicious and violent way as a coward, running and crying. This raid was impeccable and could only have taken place with the acknowledgement and help of certain other nations and people. I want to thank the nations of Russia, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, and I also want to thank the Syrian Kurds for certain support they were able to give us. This was a very, very dangerous mission. Last night was a great night for the United States and for the world. A brutal killer, one who has caused so much hardship and death, has violently been eliminated. He will never again harm another innocent man, woman, or child. He died like a dog. He died like a coward. The world is now a much safer place. The level of intelligence, the level of work was pretty amazing. When we landed with 8 helicopters, a large crew of brilliant fighters ran out of those helicopters and blew holes into the side of the building, not wanting to go through the main door because that was booby-trapped. And it was something really amazing to see. I got to watch it along with General Milley, Vice President Pence, others in the Situation Room, and we watched it so clearly.
How did you watch this?
Well, I don't want to say how, but we had absolutely perfect, as though you were watching a movie. But we are leaving soldiers to secure the oil. Now, we may have to fight for the oil. That's okay. Maybe somebody else wants the oil, in which case they have a hell of a fight. But there's massive amounts of oil, and we're securing it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it stops ISIS, because ISIS got tremendous wealth from that oil. We have taken it. It's secured. Number two, and again, somebody else may claim it, but either we'll negotiate a deal with whoever's claiming it, if we think it's fair, or we will militarily stop them very quickly. We have tremendous power in that part of the world. I'll tell you who loves us being there. Russia and China. Because while they build their military, we're depleting our military there. So Russia loves us being there. Now, Russia likes us being there for 2 reasons. Because we kill ISIS, we kill terrorists, and they're very close to Russia. We're 8,000 miles away.
And there you heard from U.S. President Donald Trump himself. Doctor, what is your take on the most recent and most serious killing, I guess, that we've had in quite a number of years?
Well, I think it's a foreign policy success for President Donald Trump, so he has every reason, every right to jubilate about it, particularly coming just a few weeks after we had issues in northern Syria with the decision of President Trump to withdraw 1,000 American troops from that, from northern Syria, the troops supporting the Kurdish-led social democratic forces in Syria. So this is good news, but whether it will translate into political benefit for him in an election season still remains to be seen. 2, if you look at the reactions from across the world by world leaders, there seems to be a consensus of opinion that this is a milestone, to use President Emmanuel Macron or France's phrase, a turning point, as some other world leaders call it, turning point. That's how Recep Erdogan, the president of Turkey, describes this development. Now, Iraq, is the only country that is not so excited. I think the, foreign minister of Iraq says it's not a big deal. That after all, it's your creature. Russia is a bit cautious. Russia is saying that, well, we don't have enough information yet. But the truth of the matter is that it's a major blow to, terrorism. Yeah. It's a major achievement for international cooperation on the war against terrorism. You recall that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was the caliph of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, the ISL or the Daesh, as it is otherwise called. And since 2011, the Americans had placed a reward, on his head, a bounty on his head of about $10 million for anyone who is able to provide information that would lead to his capture. And then, of course, the United Nations also classified him as a specially designated terrorist. Yeah. In other words, he's considered as the head of the Islamic State, as an enemy of the world, of the free world. And now that he has been trapped by the special forces, special U.S. forces, the Delta Force, as it is otherwise known, he chose to take his own life. And that's why President Trump says that he died like a dog, he died like a coward, but one thing that has been made very clear is that this does not translate into ultimate victory against terrorism. Yeah. That the fight, and the British, the United Kingdom, they made this very clear, that, what it means is that, the fight will have to continue until the battle against terrorism is won. And I think Japan, the Japanese minister also made this point, that yes, one individual may have been trapped and he has committed suicide, but the organization still remains. Yeah. So who knows who will replace Al-Baghdadi, as the caliph of the Islamic State. Yes.
Even means Nigeria as well.
So it's the organization that has to be crushed. But meanwhile, there's consensus of opinion that this is a major achievement. And personally, for President Trump, it's a foreign policy achievement.
Absolutely. Let's head over to Argentina now for a last story where conservative President Mauricio Macri has conceded defeat in the country's presidential elections to center-left Peronist candidate Alberto Fernandez, as frustrated voters rejected the incumbent's handling of bruising economic crises in the country. Now, Macri told supporters at his headquarters that he had called Alberto Fernandez to congratulate him and invited him for a breakfast chat on Monday at the Pink Presidential Palace. Authorities said that Fernandez had 47.83% of the votes, compared to Macri, who had 40.66% of the votes, when 91.21% of the votes were counted. Now, he did need 45% support, or 40% support, with a 10 percentage point lead over the nearest rival to avoid a runoff vote on November 24th. Now, the result is going to mark a dramatic return to high office of former President Cristina Fernandez, Alberto Fernandez's vice presidential running mate. Let's take a quick look.
I want to congratulate the President-elect Alberto Fernandez. I want to congratulate him. I've just spoken with him and have invited him to have breakfast together in the Rosda, because we have to begin the transition. I also have to say that thanks to all of the work today, we are based on a much stronger foundation, thanks to all of the work we did together. Many of those things we have achieved together. So many said they were impossible, but we achieved them, and they are incredibly important.
Okay, Doctor, any quick words on that?
Interesting development in Argentina, but first let's start with Mauricio Macri. He has shown, good sportsmanship.
Yeah, he has.
He congratulated Fernandez, and conceded defeat, and I think that is in good spirit. But for him, when he came to power, he promised what he called zero poverty. So, but he's not been able to deliver on that. Inflation went up under Macri to about 56%. And there were also issues about wages and benefits for workers and pensioners. And that was why when the result was announced, there was jubilation, all over Argentina. So in a sense, you may say that, this was an election about the performance of the pro-market, liberal, pro-business Macri.
Yeah.
His failure to deliver has seen him out of power. And the people that have come back are the Peronists. Alberto Fernandez, with his vice president being Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. Now, they are not related.
I was wondering, actually,
yes,
as well.
The Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, her husband was previously, president, and then she later also became president for 2 terms, and now she's back as a vice president. And one of the first things she did was to go to her husband's grave. Now, however, there are challenges ahead. They will need to turn the economy around.
Yeah.
That's the 2 Fernandez. They will need to worry about the IMF loan that was taken last year. They will need to worry about wages and benefits, for workers and pensioners. So there's a lot of work to be done.
A lot of work ahead of them. That is all that we have on the news headlines.